certainly agree with the families that I've worked with over the years. I think I've mentioned before that many of them have never seen a healthy relationship. Generation after generation has come forth with violence as a pattern in the home. And if a child has never seen a healthy relationship, they can't create one when they begin to relate to peers or to the opposite sex. So the social norming of violence is, I think, very widespread. And what is really alarming is the fact that there doesn't seem to be a lot of bells going off to stop or to change this, or no money is being allocated to prevention, which is what we would need in order to be able to change the norm. So we're not allocating resources, not human resources or other resources, to helping people to change, or to even ask people to change. This is reflected in our court system, in the way that we treat violence when it comes into the courts. We had judges here last week, and they talked about how the court system deals with that in many cases, and it came up that a domestic violence simple assault is a Class A misdemeanor. We don't probate Class A misdemeanors. And therefore, we miss the opportunity to interrupt the cycle of violence in families because we don't pay any attention to the first time it shows up in our system. We wait until it's a tertiary issue. We wait until it has gotten as bad as it can get before we try to do anything. And it's all about trying to fix something that's already happened, not about trying to prevent it. And I think I used the term last week, we need to put the ambulance at the top of the cliff instead of the bottom. We're not really doing very much with prevention with our children or with the families where violence is an issue. Our legislation is poor. We need incremental sentencing. We need sentencing for first offenders, second offenders, third offenders, just as we have for DUI offenders. If you get stopped for a DUI, you know what to expect. If you know it's going to be expensive and it's going to get to your pocketbook. If you commit an assault, a domestic assault, you probably are going to get a slap on the wrist, and it's going to be dismissed.
If I could just to give people an idea, a Class A misdemeanor is a speeding ticket.
This is equivalent.
Yes. I mean, that is a Class A misdemeanor. So you can slap your spouse around, and it's like, oh, a speeding ticket almost. That's horrific.
And we have people who are reoffended in Tennessee. Well, here in Hamilton County, we just did a recent study in our court system here and found that we have reoffenders who've reoffended up to 38 times. That tells us that what we're doing is not working.
Well, I think it also has had something to do with a male-dominated legal system. And the facts being, this does not mean that all men condone domestic violence, and I certainly don't want to give that impression. But, you know, in just my history of even dealing with these issues, you will find that in most cases, judges deal with this issue a little differently, particularly if it is a member of the community that is deemed as an outstanding member of the community, or if it's a law enforcement officer. You know, you're going to get off, and it's going to be said, well, don't do it again, or whatever, but you get covered. And even sometimes in making those calls out there to go out to the house. And so we've got to start dealing with this in reality and understanding that it is an issue which does not need to have any biases involved. And until we get to that point, we're going to have some problems. And I just want to give you some statistics. We ask our participants, should this be treated as an offense? Blacks, 21% said no. Whites, 8% no. Hispanics, 17% no. These were females who saying it should not be treated as an offense. So we have some educating to do, even with our young ladies. And so when we're talking about getting to that place where you feel like this is something that should have happened or it's okay. So even young ladies are tending to treat it as if it is a traffic ticket offense. Then we asked them how many would call the police. Blacks, females, 83%, whites 44%, Hispanic 0%. Now the reason why, you immediately understand why. Because a black woman, culturally, is not going to just sit there and let a man beat her. She's going to hit back. And she's also going to get on the phone and usually call. When you're talking about white women, sometimes we tend not to want to. And this is what I found out with the young ladies. They were like, well, I don't want anybody to know that I'm being beat, because then they'll think badly of me, or they'll think badly of the boyfriend or whomever. We're talking about youth now. And Hispanics, 0%. And the reason for this is because of our immigration laws. Even if they're documented, if someone in that family is not documented, then they're afraid to, and it doesn't always even have to do with family members. They're just afraid. And so we're going to have to go and revisit our immigration laws, because we have women in the Hispanic community who are literally getting the hell beat out of them with no protection. Then we ask how many would press charges. Black women, even though they would call the police, would only press charges. Now, they would call the police at a rate of 83%, but press charges at 13%. White women, young ladies would call the police at 44%, but would press charges at 16%. Hispanic young ladies would call the police at 0% and press charges at 0%. Because you don't want to lose that man to the jail system, because they're already feeling that there's going to be some prejudice if he gets picked up. And so these are some issues that we're going to have to deal with. The biases in arresting male offenders, people of influence, and those of social status, as well as educating our young ladies to the extent that they feel okay with calling the police. But domestic violence is different, because when you're emotional, one minute you're upset with that person, and then the next person your heart kicks in. I don't know if it's your heart or just mental illness or insanity, but you begin to say, well, I love him, and that's why, or he's the father of my child, so therefore I don't want to see him go to jail. And then men go from being offenders to begging. Don't arrest me, don't call the police. So those kinds of things. And so there are a lot of factors that are involved that I'm finding with young ladies within the youth population.
And I think also there's this often unspoken idea that in domestic violence situations, well, if the person just calms down, then things will sort of blow over and it'll be okay and they'll never do it again. Or if the police officer takes them outside, takes the man outside and says, calm down, and maybe you just need to take a walk around the block. I've seen police officers take, a man who's yelling and screaming and throwing things, and you come in and clearly the wife has been assaulted, and the police officer will say, well, come outside, just calm down. Just take a walk around the block with me. And I think that manifests itself in our laws, in the legislation, in terms of what an offense like that will merit in terms of punishment. There's this idea, well, if you bring them into court and give them a stern talking to, or the person a stern talking to, and they'll come to themselves. Not realizing that many of the factors that lead to someone getting so upset that they will hit someone else, is specifically hit a child or their significant other and cause serious bodily injury. That's not something that just blows over once they calm down. That's also not something that just manifests itself through physical violence. It also manifests itself through emotional abuse, verbal abuse. Oftentimes the physical scars come later, but it's often precipitated by someone, talking down to the person or making that person feel so worthless that the physical scars are the least of their worries, right? The psychological and emotional scars remain far after. And so I think in the court system, in the way that even law enforcement professionals deal with those sorts of situations, it often comes to that point, well, the person's they're just upset. Especially if we walk into a situation where the woman isn't necessarily willing to press charges once the reality of it comes. Oftentimes you're in a hurry, you're sort of caught up in the moment, so you pick up a phone and call 911. But when the sirens come and the police come and they have handcuffs, the reality of what that means begins to hit you. And you oftentimes have a woman cowering in a corner who's not saying anything. You know, or you have a woman saying, no, 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 please don't arrest him. You know, and so a lot of times that sort of unspoken idea that this will blow over, or if he realizes what he did, it'll never happen again. You know, it's sort of an unspoken idea that transfers itself into how we deal with these cases legally.
And I want to do justice to the police department and those that go out on domestic violence calls, because these are some of the most dangerous calls there are. And so I do not want to in any way demean police officers who are answering those calls, because during that moment of domestic violence, you don't know what you're walking into. And so they should be saluted for the efforts that they make. And a lot of times they are basically trying to just calm the situation down, because sometimes there are kids there, sometimes there are other things that are going on. And so it's not easy. It's not easy going in and arresting. And if it's really, really physical, you know, you don't know how to sort out things because both parties are upset, or one party is more upset than the other, those kinds of things. And so it is more than just saying that, you know, we need to do things about the arresting, but we also have to take into consideration that we have police officers that are putting their lives on the line, you know, when they go out to answer calls.